Hey YouTube, what's going on? Snowflakes Emos here with another Master Duel deck profile. Here is what I've been playing for Skull Servants on Master Duel. Skull Servants is another archetype that I enjoy quite a bit, owning it in paper, and now on Master Duel I found the zombie tools became pretty accessible in the structure deck, and the Skull Servants themselves are not that expensive, mostly just super rares as opposed to ultra rares, and thought it'd be a fun deck to add to my Master Duel rotation. Really cool. Skull Servants are all about getting a really big King of the Skull Servants, and I love decks that are about huge monster attacks, and Skull Servants might be the deck to do it. This card gets so ridiculously big with its attack stat, and and it works well with zombie support, and particularly the dangers, which, luckily I've gotten a hold of at this point. And with that said, it just gets a lot of skulls into the grave and makes our King of the Skull Servants big to take our opponent out in one major hit. So with that said, let's get into the cards. Starting off with our monsters, which is a majority of them, we are playing 3 Skull Servant. Skull Servant is the OG vanilla from Legend of Blue Eyes that they decided later to make this archetype based around of. He's just a cool little skeleton guy in a purple cloak, and such a simple concept, but I really like it. The point of Skull Servants is we're looking to get Skull Servant and all his Skull Servant-esque cards into the graveyard, which is, which will help make our King of the Skull Servants pretty big. Speaking of King of the Skull Servants, here he is. We're playing 3 of them. The original attack of this card becomes the combined number of King of the Skull Servants and Skull Servant in your graveyard times 1,000. So for every one of these skulls we can get, he gets 1,000 other attack, which is pretty nice. And when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish a King of the Skull Servants or Skull Servant to special summon this card. This monster's attack gets so big that usually rarely happens unless they somehow switch it to defense, so maybe it can come up, but mostly we just want this guy for the huge attack stat that he will get. Next, we have a copy of White Mare. Whites are the cards that support the Skull Servant archetype, and they all usually have this card text that says this card's name becomes Skull Servant while in the graveyard. So even though he's White Mare, once he's in the graveyard, he's Skull Servant, which means he's going to boost King of the Skull Servant's attack. So this guy has the effect that you can discard this card from our hand to activate one of the following effects. Either target a banished Skull Servant or White Mare and return it to the graveyard. That's pretty nice. Or target a banished Lady in White or King of the Skull Servants and special summon it. Nice too. So, if we want to special summon a banished King of the Skull, or we just want to boost a little extra attack, both of those options are available, making this a good card. Only playing 2, found it kind of bricks at 3, and a lot of these cards are a lot more searchable now with White Baking. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of White Prince. White Prince is awesome. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send a Skull Servant and a Lady in White from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. That's Skull Servant and Lady in White here. So that's pretty nice. You get this guy off and you send those cards directly from your hand or deck to the graveyard. Thins them out of the deck, which is pretty nice. Of course, this card it becomes Skull Servant in the graveyard, and we can banish 2 Skull Servants and this card from the graveyard to special summon King. So basically, White Prince can go to the grave, send our 2 materials, then we can immediately banish those to pull King out of the deck, which is pretty nice, awesome to have. And a 1-star means that it's pretty easy to get off the field, even off of a normal summon, because we can link it away for a link 1, and that makes it pretty sweet. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of White Baking. White Baking is nice. This card also becomes Skull Servant in the grave, and if a level 3 or lower zombie monster you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can discard this card instead. Nice to have a little protection on our monsters, specifically from card effect, because that's normally what's going to get rid of it if it's going to be destroyed. And of course, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 2 monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except White Baking, that are either Skull Servant or mention it, and then discard 1 card. So it's nice, grabs us 2 Skull Servant cards, one of which we always usually want to be White Prince, because we're going to discard it right away. Discard White Prince. And what's nice about White Prince is that White Prince doesn't have a hard once per turn, so you can resolve multiple White Princes in 1 turn. Now, unfortunately, White Baking does have a hard once per turn, but that's all right. So, normally send a White Prince, maybe add a White Mare, or whichever Skull Servant we need to get things going. Maybe King if we need to normal summon it, whichever one you need in your hand for any reason, and comes in handy. Next, we got 3 copies of the Lady in White. Face up level 3 or lower zombie type monsters on the field cannot be destroyed by battle and are also unaffected by spell and trap effects, so that's pretty nice. Our King of the Skull Servants suddenly can't get Magic Cylindered, which while people don't play Magic Cylinder is always comical to see it happen. And Lady in White just says, no, you can't Raigeki, you can't Torrential Tribute our King of the Skull Servants. Now Lady in White, of course, will die. But if it got torrential, but that protects King of the Skull, and just being unaffected by spell and trap cards is very nice. Means King of the Skull Servants has less things to interfere with him attacking and destroying our opponent. Um, and of course, Lady in White is one of the materials needed for White Prince to send to the grave, so I'm gonna have it at 3 because it's very possible to resolve 3 White Prince on the regular. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of White Princess. Again, its name becomes Skull Servant while in the graveyard. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can send a White Prince from your deck to the graveyard, so that's pretty nice. We'll trigger White Prince. And of course, it has the quick effect. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard. All monsters currently on the field lose attack and defense equal to their own level / rank times 300. So what's pretty nice about this is that a lot more monsters have levels than 1. So you lower their attack quite a bit, makes it easier for King of the Skull Servants if it's big enough to OTK, especially since even if King of the Skull Servants is on the field, it's only a 1-star monster, so it will only lose 300 attack, whereas say a 7-star monster is about to lose 2100 attack, and just something to keep in mind, and pretty nice. Playing 2 copies of it, 3 is a bit cloggy. Next up on the monsters, let's talk about our 3 copies of Unizombie, one of the great normal summons in this deck. Unizombie is awesome because you can target a face-up monster on the field, discard a card, and if you do, increase that target's level by 1. Really nice if we have White Baking or White Prince to discard, or even just a Skull Servant, you know, not doing us any good in our hand, might as well get rid of it. And of course, we can use this effect again, except this time we're sending a monster from our deck to the graveyard, which is really nice because that can definitely get White Baking or White Prince or whatever we need to get things moving. Now, to note, when you use that effect, no monsters can attack except zombie monsters. That's not too big a deal. Zombie monsters are usually what we're looking for attacking anyway, but it does have some anti-synergies with the danger stuff who could be attacking otherwise, but you know, just for how much advantage this card can generate, you know, that we can't be worried about that because we need to get things going. And for the last zombie card we are playing 1 copy of Mizuki. Mizuki is pretty nice. Banish this card from your graveyard, target a zombie monster in your graveyard, special summon it. That could be any zombie monster, usually King of the Skull Servants if we want to get King of the Skull Servants going. You know, he's ready to be big in OTK. You know, we can do a follow-up Uni-Zombie play on another turn. Whichever card we're looking for, we can get it. So nice as a one-of, especially since it can be sent off of Uni-Zombie or Foolish Burial, and I don't find myself needing to resolve multiple Mizuki. Now to complement the Skull Servants, we're playing Danger cards. Dangers are nice because they're dark monsters, which give us room to play Allure of Darkness. Since we have so many dark monsters, we really want to dig through our deck, especially since we have ways to retrieve, say, banish King of the Skull Servants or things like that. Awesome to have. And of course, dangers, you know, discard cards from our hand and summon themselves for more bodies, for more, you know, special summoning material. And of course, you know, if it discards, say, a White Baking or a White Prince from our hand, that's exactly what we want. So it's a good thing to have. Our danger package includes 1 danger Jackalope. All the dangers say you can reveal this card in your hand. Your opponent randomly chooses 1 card from your entire hand, then discard the chosen card. Then if the discarded card was not danger Jackalope, you can special summon danger Jackalope and from your hand, and if you do, draw 1 card. That's kind of the effect of all of them if they're not chosen, and then of course they get different effects if they are discarded by a card effect. This one says if this card is discarded, you can special summon a danger monster from your deck in defense position except danger Jackalope. So that's pretty nice. Pull another one of these cards out of the deck for summoning material and big body. Pretty cool. Playing 1 danger Tsuchinoko. Like all the other dangers, you reveal it, your opponent chooses a card, and they discard it. If the discarded card was not Danger Tsuchinoko, you special summon this card, and if you do, draw 1 card. And if this card is discarded, you still special summon this card. So you never want it to be Danger Tsuchinoko just because you're losing out in the draw 1 effect, but sometimes it is, and not a big deal. We're playing 1 Danger Chupacabra, same as the other dangers, except that this card is discarded. You target a danger monster in your graveyard, special summon it. That makes it a nice one-of if we've already got some dangers in the grave. Playing 2 Danger Mothman, which is pretty cool. If this card is discarded, you can have both players draw one card and then both players discard one card. Pretty useful effect for getting further through our deck, and then I'm say discarding a white prince or a white baking or just another skull servant, you know, Mizuki, something like that. Next, we're playing 3 Danger Nessie. Well, this one is nice because it has a 2800 defense, which just gives it a big, big defense stat for an opponent to deal with. And of course, if this card is the one discarded, you add a danger card from your deck to your hand, which is pretty nice. Um, you know, we it gets us another danger to just go further through the deck and maybe summon more monsters. And last for the dangers, we're playing 3 Danger Bigfoot. 3000 attack means this one is great to summon, lots of extra attack power, which can help OTK. And of course, if this card is discarded, you can target a face-up card your opponent controls and destroy it, which is pretty awesome. All great effects, all help us get through the deck, and all are dark monsters to synergize with the rest of our decks. Yeah, that is the monster cards. A lot of them in this build, and but they're all pretty great. Next, let's talk about the spells here. I'm playing 1 Monster Reborn. You know, lots of things we're going to want from the graveyard. Maybe a big 3000 attack Bigfoot. Maybe another King of the Skull Servants for a huge, attack stat. Maybe a White Prince that we just sent to the grave. Reborn it, link it away to send even more cards to the grave. Lots of great options, so Monster Reborn is just an awesome card. Next, we're playing a copy of Foolish Barrel. We want a lot of this stuff in the graveyard, so being able to pick a key one like White Baking or White Prince is great. Next, we're playing Allure of Darkness. Allure of Darkness is pretty nice. Draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from our hand. And if you do not send your entire hand to the graveyard, even sending our entire hand to the graveyard is not the worst, but we're going to have so many dark monsters that we're usually going to have one to banish. And if we banish something like King of the Skull Servants or Lady in White, we can get a White Marrow later and just special summon it right out of the banish zone. So not even bad, just digs us further through our deck, and we want to do that because we want to get as many of these cards moving as possible. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Burial from a Different Dimension. I really love this card, specifically with White Prince, because we can use White Prince's effect, banish it and 2 other Skull Servants from the grave, pull a King of the Skull out of the deck, and then immediately play Burial from the Different Dimension, shoving all 3 of those cards back in the deck so that I can either do that effect again or just have the 3000 attack stat. Especially if with its quick play status, I can do this during the battle, so if my opponent isn't suspecting that I can OTK them, suddenly they can get OTK'd by an extra 3000 attack, which is pretty nice. And last, I'm playing 1 Symbol of Heritage. Activate while there are only 3 monster cards with the same name in your graveyard. Select one of those monsters and special summon it. So because everything is named Skull Servant, this card can be used to pull out any Skull Servant card. That could be White Prince if we want another White Prince effect, King of the Skull Servants if we're ready for him, just whichever one we're looking for, and that makes it a good card. I'd consider running more. As you will note, I'm running more than a 40 card deck. 42 isn't much less consistent, but I like the extra cards because we do have a lot of bricks, things like Skull Servant and Lady in White, that we don't necessarily want to see in our opening hand. We want to get them out. So a few extra cards that are cards that help us move through the deck and get things going. To make it less likely to get the Skull Servant. I don't mind the extra cards in this build. So that is it for our main deck. Now to talk about the extra deck, I don't have the most optimized extra deck, but I got a lot of good cards that help with stuff I've already had. First off, we'll talk about Immortal Dragon. Immortal Dragon is a zombie synchro, which is pretty nice. Level 6 makes it pretty accessible with Uni-Zombie and any of the Skull Servants, because by the time we use Uni-Zombie's effect twice, it'll be level 5. The Skull Servants are level 1. It's a zombie-type monster, so we can make Immortal Dragon. Immortal Dragon is nice because during the main phase, you can send a zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, this card's level becomes the difference in the original levels of that monster and this card, which is pretty nice that we can just send a zombie to the grave. We can send Mizuki, White Baking, whichever one we're looking for. Just good to have the option. When your zombie monster is destroyed by battle while this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. So pretty cool. Mostly just used as a way to get extra zombies into the grave, which is something we can use. Next, I have a copy of Red-Eye, 2 copies of Red-Eye Zombie Dragonlord. Mostly just in here because I got it from the zombie structure deck. Level 10 doesn't make it as easy to make. Can make it a bit more complicated, but during your opponent's turn, you can target a zombie monster in your graveyard, except Red-Eye Zombie Dragonlord, special summon it, and if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish a zombie monster you control to special summon this card. So, pretty cool thing to have. Recurring, sends Special summon zombie monsters, good stuff. Got a couple rank 4 XZs in here because things like Danger Mothman and Chupacabra, are level 4s. So just have the option here. Silent Honor Arc, of course, detaches 2 materials to snatch a special summoned monster in attack position and attach it to it. Dark Rebellion XZ's Dragon detaches 2 materials to target a face-up monster. Its attack becomes half, and if it does, it gains that attack. Not as useful. If I'm going to make a rank 4, usually I want to go into Minerva, the Exalted Lightsworn. Minerva is pretty sweet because we can detach 1 material to send the top 3 cards of our deck to the graveyard. A lot of that's going to be Skull Servant stuff we want to see in the graveyard, which is nice. And of course, if this card is destroyed by battle, you can send the top, or by an opponent's card effect, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then destroy cards up on the field up to the number of Lightsworn cards. We don't have any Lightsworn, so we're not going to get that, but just sending an extra 3 cards is nice to have. Now the Link monsters are a much bigger deal. I have a Link Karibo and a Relinquished Anima. I'd even maybe bump this up one, maybe get rid of these XZs that I don't really use. But these Link ones are very nice because they all require 1 level 1 monster, which is White Baking or White Prince. So if we don't have a lot to do in our hand, we can easily summon White Prince or White Baking, link it away, and that will allow us to trigger their graveyard effects. Link Karibo is nice because when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you contribute this card to change that opponent's monster's attack to 0 until the end of the turn. And when it's in the graveyard, you contribute a level 1 monster to special summon this, so a little recursion. And of course, Relinquished Anima is nice because we can summon it in a link zone, and if we can target a face-up monster this card points to that our opponent controls, and equip that face-up monster to this card. And of course, this card gains attack equal to that monster, so just a nice way to link our Skull Servant stuff off and snatch a card. Next, we're playing 2 copies of Curious, the Lightsworn Dominion. If I'm going into the extra deck, I find this to be the card I'm going into the extra deck most for, other than the Link ones. It requires 3 monsters with the same attribute, but different types. This works really well with the dangers, because the dangers are all sorts of different types. So if we have a Skull Servant card and like 2 dangers on the field, we can make Curious, and Curious is nice because it's got this nice effect that if this face-up card is destroyed by battle, well, the nice effect here is that if this card is link summoned, you can send a card from your deck to the graveyard. So that sends a key Skull Servant piece that we need. And of course, if a card is sent from your deck to the graveyard by an effect, send the top 3 cards of our deck to the graveyard. So this works really well. We can use White Prince. White Prince will get its effect, send the 2 cards. Then Curious, of course, will mill the cards, and that just gets lots of Skull Servants in our grave. And of course, if this face-up card is destroyed by battle or leaves the field because of an opponent's card effect, you can target a card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. So good for getting us a Uni-Zombie or King of the Skull Servants. Whatever you're looking for, we can get it. And the last card to talk about are my 3 copies of Pentastag. This card is really awesome. It's a Link 2 that just requires 2 effect monsters. It says if your linked monster attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing damage to the opponent. A good tool to have access to, because if our opponent is just sitting on a set card or a defense monster, we can still possibly OTK them with our huge King of the Skull Servants. All we got to do is summon this first and make sure King of the Skull Servants is in the zone that it's linked to, right below it. So keep that in mind when you summon your King of the Skull Servants. Put it in a position so that it can be used with Pentastag. But this comes up more than I expected, so definitely glad to have it. Of course, extra deck can be optimized with more cards that you have, but this extra deck is good enough, and I didn't want to spend any more dust on anything. So that's it for the deck. So here's a replay to show the deck in action. Not the greatest hand here. We got that vanilla Skull Servant we don't want to see. King is alright. We got a White Prince and a White Baking, but our Danger Bigfoot does make this hand live. If we can use Danger Bigfoot and discard one of these 2, we can really kind of get things going. We are going second against our opponent here, so we got to hope they don't completely negate us out of the game. They play Mount of the Bound Creator. Looks like they're playing a God Slime / Egyptian God deck. They're going to summon their 2 Reactor Slimes, and of course Foolish Burial, the Winged Dragon of Ra. Now Winged Dragon of Ra, not a high rank deck. I wasn't in a high rank game at this time. But, when you're going through the lower ladders at the beginning of the season, it's a deck I see quite a bit more. So, with that said, they're just going to leave those nice little 500 attack monsters and attack look nice. We're going to top deck a white mare, of course, and we're going to start by playing Danger Bigfoot. We are going to be sending King of the Skull to the grave. Not the biggest deal. We draw into Danger Jackalope, which we can go again. This time we're sending White Prince, which is nice, and drawing into Burial from a different dimension. Very nice. We'll use White Prince's effect to, send a Skull Servant and a Lady in White. Then we're going to normal summon White Baking and link it away into Relinquished Amina. White Baking is going to activate its effect. We're going to add a White Prince and a White Mare. White Prince, of course, will then be discarded, and which will use his effect again, sending another Skull Servant and Lady in White. Now we have a lot of Skull Servants in the grave. We're going to take the token with the Relinquished Anima, because why not? Now I'm going to use White Prince as effect, banish it, and Skull Servant and Lady in White to bring King of the Skull out from the deck. Then I'm going to immediately throw those cards back, which is pretty nice to have. And White Prince, of course, I'm going to banish it again, summon another King of the Skull, which is pretty nice. Use White Prince's effect to put a Skull Servant back in the grave, making these guys 7,000 attack. Use another one to special summon our Lady in White, which is pretty nice. Now with the Lady in White, I can take Relinquished Anima, Lady in White, and our Danger Jackalope and go into Curious. Curious will use its effect. We're going to send another White Prince. White Prince, of course, will then trigger. We can send this last Skull Servant from my hand and a Lady in White from the deck. Now I got two Skull Servants, each with 12,000, 13,000 attack because Curious is going to mill more cards. Now, of course, they're going to try to set Metal Reflex Line during the battle phase by tributing it. I don't care. The token is left up, and they're going to play Metal Reflex Line. Doesn't matter. I'd be able to kill it with the king, but doesn't matter. Boom. Just 12,000 damage. Really nice for getting that secret quest, too, is another thing I like about this deck is, getting that secret quest where you deal more than 9,999 damage. Pretty sweet. And so that's what it does. You just make Skull Servant so big that you're just going to attack over whatever they got. So that's it for my Skull Servant deck. Just a really cool deck that special summons a lot of monsters and makes a huge attack monster. It's pretty cool. Get a lot of dual score points for doing a lot of damage with your big King of the Skull Servants. Easy to get a lot of these extra deck summons, specifically the Link one. Just does a lot of cool things, and the Skull Servants are just cool. I think it's a very fun deck. So very glad to have it in the Master Duel rotation. I have a lot of fun with it. Love to know what you're doing with Skull Servants, what you're playing. Definitely, if you're looking to play this in high ranks, this is not the build. You're going to have more hand traps and things like that, probably. So just keep that in mind as you play with Skull Servants. But thanks for checking out the profile. Appreciate showing it to y'all. I'll catch y'all in the next one.